Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. In case this is your first time here, welcome to Shop Talk. In case this is your ninth or 10th time here, welcome back to Shop Talk. If you've been here more than 10 times, you actually get a coupon for one free episode of Shop Talk, so go and redeem that in person. The idea here is, it's Monday. Hopefully it's after work for you. Let's kick back. We'll talk a little data platform stuff, a little technical topic stuff, Q&A. If you have any data platform style questions you want to drop into chat, go for it. If you want to try to derail us as we attempt to make reasonable and cogent points, go for that as well. I mean, reasonable and cogent points, there is a first time for everything on this in this show. So we might actually get to one of those tonight. You'll have to stay tuned to find out. I have with me my co-host, one of my co-hosts. The others are definitely exist as people, but they're just not here right now. And the one person we do have here with us, Mike Christensen. How you doing, Mike?
Doing very well, thanks. Hope everybody's doing well.
Yeah, and good to have someone back to rein me in. My reign of terror is over for now. Andrew says, did you know that the shower curtain industry says you should replace them every 3 months? I would replace the shower curtain industry more than once every 3 months, personally. But I am kind of an industry clean freak that way. Just get rid of the entire industry, start over again. As far as replacing shower curtains every 3 months, I could believe that. However, I could also believe the number of people who actually do that ranks somewhere around 0. And I get the feeling this is just an attempt to boost shower curtain sales. There was some enterprising MBA who said, if we tell people that they have to replace it every 3 months, then we could triple our sales. Actually, more like, let's see, 120 times our sales. I don't even know what the appropriate phrase would be for 120 times.
1,200%, right?
Yeah, like duodecentennial. I don't know. Derailed before he even started. New record. That is actually pretty close to the record. Yeah, if it's not the record, I'll give you credit. It's pretty close. But
Anders must have read what I read too, because I read a thing saying you should get rid of your pillows every year. You should get rid of sponges every week. There's some checklist. You go broke replacing all that stuff.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'm not going to talk about my habits here, although
that's too shop talk. Yeah, it's shop talk.
Yeah, sponges last until they fall apart, pretty much. And you're thinking the shower sponge things, whose name I can't remember off the top of my head. Loofahs. There we go. A loofah. You use that thing until it's like component scraps, and then drive it for another 3 months after that. Because, look, if I wanted to spend $1 every week, all right, I'm not planning on doing that with loofahs. I'm not spending a full $1 every week.
We're not making that loofah money.
Exactly. I can't afford loofah money. COVID, my loofahs last for 4 years. 4 years might be pushing it, but I'm with you in spirit, Anders. All right. First real topic for the night. Although, this is loofah money. Yeah. This is shop talk. We're all about loofah money. I need to sell out to YouTube so I can make that loofah money. So I could probably make $1 a week. First topic for tonight. Live 360. Live 360 call for speakers came out today. Actually, it came out about an hour and a half ago. So that is open. It is in Orlando. It is probably my favorite tech conference, in part because they pay. So that's always a good sign. But it's in Orlando in November. Usually great weather. Nice event. It's at the Universal Studios properties. And it's a nice combination of a bunch of different tech platforms. So you have app developers, data platform specialists, you have security people, cloud specialists, IoT and AI and ML people, and just a broad mixture, even M365 types. So broad mixture of disciplines all coming together in one big conference venue. Highly recommend it if you've never been before. Robotics? No, I don't know that there have ever been any robotic sessions, but I have seen a couple IoT sessions. So those uncommon. However, think professional app platform stuff.
So you can have a bot, but not a robot.
Yeah, I'm sure if somebody had an interesting enough talk that was related to robotics, that it might get past them, and you could present there. So do recommend, if you can, submit to that. One quick tip is, if you are interested in submitting, submit 3, 4, 5 sessions, just because they like to have multiple sessions for a speaker. So every year that I've spoken there, it's been 2 or 3 talks that get selected. And it's uncommon that I see a person with one session. So in case that does sound enticing, call for speakers is open. It will be open until March 25th. So there's a couple of months to get in there. Also, this year, Live 360 and Pass Summit will not be the same week, which means there's even a possibility that you could go to both. Pass Summit is November 4th through the 8th. Live 360 will be November 17th through the 22nd.
17.
So Anders is going to be in Norway in October, Seattle in early November, possibly for Pass Summit. Florida in late November. Well, this is in Orlando, so you could go to Florida in late November. Philippines all of December. I think you've got that snowbird life down, Anders. Check out Bergen, Mike says. I've never been to Bergen, but it seems like a neat place.
It's very cool, and you can get a train from Oslo, the big city.
Right. So, yeah, works out. Too much rain. Maybe so. But then you're going to Seattle, so come on. Or are we going to say that's just Seattle drizzle? It doesn't count as real rain. It's just soul-sucking drizzle. I have actually seen sunshine in Seattle. It is physically possible. It only happens 3 or 4 days a year, but, it's there.
Oh, I thought you were going to make a tanning booth joke.
Ha! Seattle is sunny compared to Bergen. Okay, yeah, maybe. Again, never been there. Wouldn't say no to a trip there. Although with my new
You'd
job,
say yeah.
maybe so. With my new job, though, I'd actually have to get approval to leave the country. So, Norway would probably be a fairly easy approval to get. Certain other places may not be as easy to get approval to get, but that's my own problem to deal with. Only time I saw sun in Bergen was before descending through the clouds. That's when this is welcome to 1800s London. Except with 30% less cholera. All right, our second topic of the night, and the one that I'm hoping to milk for a while, because I'm going to put it this way, folks. I've got this Live 360. That was one of the real topics for tonight. This is the other real topic for tonight. I have a threat topic that I've got on my list. Mike's going to try to throw out some topics as well. So today, derailment may actually be rerailment. You may be the hero, chat. You may be the hero. Maybe not the hero we need, but the hero we deserve. So this one comes from friend of Shop Talk, friend of the user group, Chris Voss. Chris, by the way, will be speaking for TriPass in June in person. Well, it'll be the in-person meeting. Whether Chris is in person or not may depend on our answer tonight. But Hopefully, we'll be able to see him in person. Looking forward to getting to see him again. But his question, I'm gonna summarize it just a little bit. But the question is about the modern data stack. That term, and there's a little bit of precursor to this question, and that is modern data stack is absolutely a marketing term that gets thrown out around a lot and involves a lot of products in the Microsoft ecosystem, but also a lot of products not in the Microsoft ecosystem. In the Microsoft case, they've been pushing modern data stack, and before that it was modern data warehouse with Azure Synapse Analytics. But they've been pushing the modern term quite a bit and have tried to finagle it as cloud first, consolidating to a data lake, building a data warehouse on top of your data lake, and tools that are kind of familiar to SQL people, but not totally. So thinking about Apache Spark and how PySpark, SparkQL, so Spark SQL, and that sort have become the language of data movement, but storing data in a data lake using the Parquet format, using Delta tables, and kind of driving off of a file-first platform that then you may virtualize or reshape the data for querying using SQL, because no matter how many times somebody tries to reinvent it, SQL ends up being the data language, and for good reason. Fiesel's Law is a thing for a reason.
Law, yeah.
And welcome in, Chris. Glad to see you here. So our questioner is in chat. Our interrogator, I think interrogator would work for tonight, is in chat. So if Fabric matures in 1 or 2 years or so, it could be a good all-in-one tool that can handle that data governance aspect as well. And instigator. Instigator is a better term than interrogator. I could see that. Re-railer, which I'm sure sounds better in French. Is it the table will be in Delta format if one stores as a Delta table, not Parquet? That's a great question, and I'm going to use that as a way of sidestepping the big question and focus on the small question. So thank you for that. So Delta format, think of Delta format as Parquet Plus, where Parquet, in case for anybody who's not very familiar with this, Parquet is a columnar data storage format. It is a file format that is really good at aggregating data. So if you're familiar with T-SQL, with SQL Server, column store data. Column store data follows the same principles as what Parquet would give you. If you have a bunch of repetition within a column, then we can pack that down incredibly well. We're looking at millions of rows of data, ideally billions of rows of data, somewhere in that range for our Parquet files. And we're doing an impressive amount of compression down to a relatively small number if we have fairly low cardinality. So where this works best is things like fact tables, where we have very large tables in terms of numbers of rows, not necessarily a lot of string values, not a lot of string columns, a lot of numeric values, and a lot of repetition in values. So even when we do have strings, ideally they would be repeated strings. Think like a city name, where there may be thousands of cities, but if you have one record per person in the United States, and we have, let's say, 25,000 city names, which rough number I'm pulling off the top of my head, that's still a massive space savings over having 330 plus million data entries of varchar or in varchar 50 or 60 or 100. Instead, you turn that down to 25,000 entries, of which we have a dictionary of those values, and then kind of have a few bits to indicate, or a couple bytes to indicate, this one points to here. Here's your pointer. Here's your pointer. Long story short, You can take a lot of data, pack it down, compress it down to much smaller disk utilization, disk space requirements than you would have if you just laid the data out flat, like a CSV would. So that's the quick primer on Parquet. Delta is a relatively recent innovation and came out of Databricks. Delta is Parquet files as the base plus some additional information to track changes. And my recollection is the original form of Delta tables were Parquet files with JSON files to mark the change sets. I wouldn't stick by that today. I wouldn't guarantee that it's Parquet plus JSON, but I would not be surprised if at the end of things it still was. And so Parquet files have the advantage that they compress down really well. They are, if you're performing data aggregation, they can be really fast. Processing them is really quite nice. But adding new rows, not great. It's not intended for adding new rows or updating existing rows or deleting rows. So you don't want to try to modify those Parquet files because they have a fair amount of metadata about the file itself, like row counts, numbers of columns, structures of the columns, that kind of stuff in headers. And so in addition to changing the row itself, you would have to change the headers, you'd have to recalculate some stuff, possibly rebuild dictionaries. Like, not the type of thing that makes for rapid data updates. So that's one of the downsides. Unlike a CSV where I can delete a row very easily in a CSV. I can update a row easily in a CSV. Not as easy to update those files. In order to support closer to real-time analysis or handling of data, we have this data in Delta format where it's tracking changes. And occasionally we can rebuild and have that underlying Parquet file get updated. We can also track when things have changed over time, which gets to this notion of time travel in Delta. If you're familiar with SQL Server, it's temporal tables, very similar in structure to that, where I have when things changed, what the values were, what the values became, and I can look as of a specific point in time, what did my data look like? All right, that's Parquet, that's Delta. So if the table is in Delta format, or is there a special Delta format that's stored as a Delta table, or is it Parquet? At the end of the day, it is mostly Parquet, and there is some controlling information about changes that have not been modified into the file. So that's the long answer to it. And Mike, as Mike says, Parquet Plus sounds like you need a subscription. Yeah, they're actually showing one of the NFL games next year on Parquet Plus, which I'm going to derail myself. Right here. So Louis Rossmann, if you're not familiar with him, he's a pretty interesting guy. But he has a YouTube.
He fixes computer boards.
Yep, exactly. He specializes in fixing Mac boards, especially, and went on a kick not too long ago about piracy. And basically, the argument is a lot of people pirate stuff not because, hey, I can't afford it, not because, hey, I don't want to pay for it, but rather the convenience that you get from pirating is actually better than what you get from actually paying for the service. His example was Netflix, how Netflix, he bought the 4K Netflix, except that it wouldn't work on his computer. It downscaled him to 720p, not because he couldn't play 4K videos, but because, you don't have the right kind of video card. You're running Linux as your operating system. You didn't do all the things that we wanted to do to show a 4K video. And his response is, well, that's completely bogus because I can go pirate the same movie, get it in 4K, and play it in 4K on my Linux machine with no problem. So why are you preventing me from doing the thing that I'm paying you for? And therefore, like, what's the point of paying for the service? If the service is markedly worse than the pirated version, you've got major problems because the DRM doesn't work on Linux. Yeah, pretty much. But then you can play the 720p version on Linux, and okay, so you get the low quality version. I have a similar rant about NFL, where what I want, Sunday Ticket sounds like it's what I want, except it's not, because Sunday Ticket, in case you're not familiar, basically says you can watch any NFL game from any team as long as that team is not in your local market. And also, you can't watch the ESPN game, as I recall. And, NBC games, no, you can't really watch those. All the Peacock games, no, you can't watch those. You're kind of limited. Now, I may be wrong on some of those parts, but I know that there are some games that you cannot watch. You're blacked out in your local region, which local regions is infuriating to begin with. But at the end of the day, what I want is I will pay you X number of dollars, where X is a reasonable number. Like Sunday Ticket, something like $300 or so. I would pay $300 to $500 a year to be able to watch any game, anytime, anywhere, any network. Just show it to me. I know that there are problems with advertising. Like the big deal is advertisements in the local area. And my response is, that's fine. Play the ads, work that out with CBS, with Fox, with NBC, with ESPN. You've got 4 or 5 partners here. Work it out, work out the dollars, and that way actually provide a service that is reasonable, and people will pay. Otherwise, you have streaming services where you can watch these games, and the quality of those streaming services is better than the version that you pay for because you can watch all of the games. And like Anders mentions, local blackouts used to be the case for a broadcast if they did not sell out the stadium. It is still the case. It hasn't happened to too many teams lately, and teams have gotten around that a little bit. Like Jacksonville at one point, they had to tarp over a bunch of seats so that they could sell out. And and so they will try to get around that. I know about 15 years ago, Buffalo had a couple of games that were threatening even a local blackout. Because at that point in time, they weren't getting on national television more than once a year. But yeah, the local blackout used to be the case. Not for over the air. I think it may still be the case for over the air. But also NFL blackouts are uncommon. This is same problem with MLB TV. I've been a subscriber to MLB TV for 15 plus years. Actually, it's got to be about 17 or 18 years. I used to watch the condensed games in Germany because I'd wake up and play the 7-minute game, and I could watch 5 or 6 of those. MLB TV. Oh, you live in this region. Like if you live in the Southeast, here, this is actually really funny because where I live, my house, I'm blacked out from Washington, from Baltimore, and I think those are the only 2 teams. So Washington and Baltimore. My parents live 30 minutes west of me. They're blacked out from Washington, Baltimore, and Atlanta. My dad is a big Atlanta fan. That's the whole reason for having MLB TV, is so that he can watch Atlanta games. Which means, in order to watch the game, Charlotte, no, not even Charlotte, Anders, Mebane. Once you cross Durham, once you get just west of Durham, it starts blacking out Atlanta. So, cool. Now he's got to turn on a VPN and say he's in Colorado or somewhere else to watch this Atlanta game. And again, it's like, it would be easier to pirate the game than to pay for the service and then to set up the VPN and then to do all of these other things, which is what we have done. So yeah, I'm still paying for the service, but This is a veiled infomercial for a VPN service. There. Oh man, if only I had sold out sooner, then I could have a NordVPN commercial here. But no, no, I don't have any discount codes. I don't have any kickbacks. I'm desperate for kickbacks. Please email. No, actually, it's a veiled infomercial for hello companies. Please create a service that is not more inconvenient than pirating your service, and then people will use your service. And that's the moral of that story. So now that I've finished derailing myself, let's try to get back on the tracks here. What I understand is if the table is stored as a Delta table, its format is Delta, but this table exists as a few files that are Parquet and JSON. I guess it depends on what you mean by format, but because in one sense, it's exposed to you as a Delta format. But yeah, under the covers, we're really talking about Parquet files, and we're talking about some additive notion like JSON on top of it to handle change sets. So it's not a specific file format that is special for like a .delta. It is .parquet and other stuff with it. So basically, streaming services are garbage, and we should consolidate back to cable. That is funny, and it is slightly scary. And it is probably going to happen. Maybe not cable. Actually, there are streaming services that are streaming service consolidations, and I can foresee a move back to a cable-like substance. Now that
I will
Yep.
tell you, my parents get like the most expensive package you can get. There's stuff that you can't get still, so I don't think it's a panacea still at this moment. And then it's a real pain in the neck to get it to work correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, basically everything is terrible, and I hate it all. I think that's the way to summarize this.
I just do little plays for my wife. I just act stuff
out. There's a no theater joke in there somewhere, especially as database administrators. So I am doing a quick look at see if I can dig up more information on Delta. Yeah. So actually, it is Parquet files with JSON. That's exactly what it is. So my old memory is, in fact, still correct, it seems. This is, by the way, a link that I can drop in chat here on creating Delta Lake tables. Because Delta Lake has become a general purpose open Linux Foundation standard. And as a result, everybody's following roughly that standard. Databricks has their own special cases. Microsoft has their own special cases. But yeah, as far as it goes, there is at least a standard that they're supposed to follow. So, all right. Modern data stack, of which Delta format, Delta tables are a huge part of this. And thinking about this, okay, Chris's example, Snowflake on Azure for a warehouse, Azure Data Factory for orchestration, dbt for data lineage and transformation, Power BI for dashboarding. But the question becomes, is modern data stack a real thing, or is it just a marketing term? So what are general thoughts on the term, and what does modern data stack mean to you? And since you're here, we're gonna put you on the spot. When you hear modern data stack, what are you thinking? Tell me how it makes you feel.
Well, I'm also thinking about SQL Data Partners. I just started it, but you guys did a recap of like Microsoft or Summit. Like some of the stuff, it's there's a reason why Oracle's still embedded in stuff, right? Like I think that when I think about the stack, I think about like lift and shift and updating is always a challenge. And so you want it to be better, or you want it to be, you want, if there's new technology, if it's Cockroach DB or if it's
I hate that
Snowflake.
name, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Um, you want it to have some strategic advantages for you, either in like I'm sure like a pyramid, like cost, maintenance, accuracy, security, whatever they are, and you want your company, even if you're not a data company, you want to try to keep up, because things like IWS get deprecated, or if you're on we were on Siebel in my old firm, and Siebel was literally calling us and saying we're not supporting the software anymore. So there's like a variety of reasons to update or change your stack, but I think that the stack is I don't I've come to the I like when you sometimes say it depends. Like I think that like I don't hold my breath when people start selling stuff to me. I know I have colleagues that are friends that are using Snowflake and they really like it. Um, we're going from Oracle to SQL Server. The things that I like, there's things that I need to like learn. We're supposed to change our entire BI stack from Tableau to Power BI. And when Eugene said something like they're kind of deprecating BI stuff, I kind of freaked out a little bit. But I think I'm oversimplifying what he said, but I hope that that isn't the case. I mean, on-prem, and I don't think they would do that with the cloud, but so yeah, I'm rambling at this point, but I think that when I think tech stack, if I summarize it, I think trade-offs, but sometimes the trade-offs are worth it, and sometimes you have to upgrade and adjust your stack accordingly.
Yep. So Enhanced QC, before I respond to Mike, Enhanced QC says Oracle's like Java. When the aliens land in 4,000 years, Java scripts will still be running. And also, when the aliens do take over, we're actually going to use COBOL for the payroll to give them their money. So, 4,000 years from now, we'll still have COBOL systems.
On PDFs.
Yeah, PDF. Painful data format, painful document format. That's what it should stand for.
That's good.
Yay, I'll have a job with the aliens. There you go. Exactly. So you could be a
Your
head
job
in a
would be to
jar.
train the aliens, and then they'll send you to the curb.
This would be like
Disney.
Futurama. You'll be a head in a jar and then still be developing and dealing with COBOL.
Don't tempt him. He would like that.
That's possible. That is possible. Now, as mentioning what Eugene said, Power BI, they're not really deprecating anything. I will say, if you use Power BI's red-headed stepchild product, Power BI Report Server, they've always fallen behind on that, and I think it's going to get the SQL Server reporting services treatment, where, oh, hey, yeah, that product still exists. You can certainly use it. What's the last interesting thing that came to the product? I don't know. Maybe it was something a decade ago. So Power BI Report Server was always dragging behind, and it feels like it's not a type of thing that Microsoft's going to push hard for. Especially, they're focusing the BI efforts on Fabric and Power BI Online, which I mean it's tied in closely with Fabric. Even if you're not using Microsoft Fabric, Power BI Online is still a lot of the same development components. COBOL people are white bush, white beard. Many SQL DBAs are now as old as the COBOL people were in 1999. You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Yeah, there's some truth to that.
So, but still, COBOL's fun to make fun of, despite the fact there's a reason it's still around. It was a successful language, and it did a really good job of bringing in a generation of developers who were not incredibly symbolic expression inclined. And the reason people make fun of it so much is because these are the symbolic expression developers. These are the people who look at Perl and say, "Yes, of course. Why wouldn't I use this? Why regular expressions make a lot of sense. It's very clear. This caret, obviously, I know what it means, and these other characters, yeah, of course. These squigglies, they make perfect sense to me." And COBOL was kind of the opposite. I mean, SQL is closer to COBOL in that respect, where it is intended to be a friendlier language in terms of being more verbose, more written out, which I think is why a lot of developers don't like SQL because I want my terse 3 character operation and I have to write a full 6 letters for select.
Oh man, yeah, I like bugs.
Yeah, so I kind of get that. So all right, my
Oh,
thoughts.
funny, I
Modern,
have a
yeah,
funny Perl story.
go for it.
I got all these free books from on Perl, and I was going to learn it, and then somebody came by my office and they said, "Don't you dare learn that." They said it's a lot of pluses and squiggly lines, and you're not going to like it. I'm like, all right, thanks, Dodge.
Perl Perl is a really nice language. It is a very useful language. It is also a write only language. And yeah, as much as I make fun of it, there are ways to write clean and easy to read, easy to understand Perl. It's just that nobody does it because that's like twice as many characters. So I can save 35 seconds of typing by making this inscrutable. It is one of the original code golf languages.
Oh yeah, yeah. You're a consultant, you send it in, and then they code review it, and it comes back.
Yep. One of these days I'm going to learn RPG. The only RPGs that I want to learn have a sign on that says "Beware Backblast."
Is that
Um,
Zork?
no, no, that would be rocket propelled grenades, which I'm sure would be
Oh,
really fun to fire one of those. Um, just make sure to watch out for the backblast. Um, I like SQL. Hey, so do I. I think most of us in here love SQL. Like Baldur's Gate. That could be another RPG type, yes. And okay, I'll give you that kind of RPG as well. But yeah, welcome in by the way. And yes, even though we are rambling and ranting and making fun of languages and also trying to justify languages while making fun of them, it's what we do. It's what we do here. But modern data stack. One of these days, Chris will finally answer the question. It's going to take the entire episode, but that was by design. When it comes to modern data stack, I will say a fair amount of this is marketing terminology. Some of it is, though, I think it is rooted in these are practices that do work well. And, we've seen the problems in business intelligence. We've all heard the stories for decades, literally decades. X% of warehouse projects fail, X% of data warehouse projects fail. And pick whatever number you want. I'm sure you can find a study that gives you that number, as long as the number is sufficiently high. 90%, 80%, 70%. Pick whatever
I
number
get
you
the
want.
80. The 80 gets thrown a lot by some IBM scientist, and,
Yeah.
especially yeah.
And I've heard people land on 90, I've heard 70, I've heard 60. Usually the number is above 50.
Well, I'll just say I know you're on a roll. I joined this group in 2017 or 18 because we were moving to SQL Server. Guess what year it is?
Yeah, and you're still moving to SQL Server.
And it's been delayed until next year, 2025. So
2025, year of the Linux desktop.
modern. I think SQL Server's been around since what, 30 years? Sorry.
Right.
Anyway, I interrupted.
Yeah, well, SQL Server, let's see, it has been around since the mid 90s. 94, I think, would have been the first. I think that was when they had their Sybase SQL Server. So, yeah, you're talking 30 years here. But when it comes to these sorts of projects, that data warehouse, we all know, hey, this is very important because it's going to provide conformed information, conformed dimensions, consistent information, consistent measures, trustworthy measures, calculations that every team can agree upon and depend upon. And these are some of the problems for why they always fail because, well, people can't agree, they can't depend, the underlying data is not trustworthy, the calculations are not sensical, and nobody can agree on what a customer really is. So, all right, given that, and also given the fact that it takes approximately 12 weeks to add one extra column to the warehouse, hey, we needed something faster. We need a way to fail faster. If we're not going to have success, we at least might as well have
Extra failure.
Yeah, faster failure. And so we have data lakes. Let's dump all of our data out into files. And then there were several advances that made this practical. I mean, we talked Parquet format. I haven't talked orc format yet, but I love orc format, if only for the name. And I will say, this type of data structure has significantly helped the formation of data lakes and making them useful, as well as adoption in a lot of different tools. And I'm obviously eliding over a whole lot. There's a whole lot in the Hadoop world, in Spark, in distributed computing that kind of nudged us in this direction over the course of a good decade plus. But for the purposes of not turning this into a lecture on Hadoop, which you're welcome for that. I could very easily turn this into a lecture on Hadoop. I'm like this close to doing it right now, so don't push me over that edge. Basically, we have seen these technological moves in order to get data out there to people faster. And we've seen modern data stack kind of coalesce around, I have a data lake, which, look, it's a fancy term for I've got a share drive someplace, and that share drive may be locally, it may be in the cloud. It may be in Azure, it may be in AWS. Hopefully it's not in Google. And I'm going to dump a bunch of files there. I'm going to structure those files in a way that hopefully a bunch of people can make use of on different teams in different ways. And then we're going to try to agree on some of the measures, some of the conformity, some of the benefits of a warehouse without really being able to get to the full warehouse world necessarily. And so for a little bit, we had this idea of modern data warehouse, like Azure Synapse Analytics, where, oh, well, yes, your underlying data, we have this combination of file-based storage in a data lake and then being able to write SQL queries on top of it. In AWS, that was Athena, where you had data stored in S3 and you could run Hive jobs on top of it. So now I don't necessarily need data structured like it is for Oracle or for SQL Server in specific binary format. Let's put the data in some common format and be able to query over it. So we got serverless SQL pools in Azure Synapse Analytics. We got AWS Athena. We had in the Hadoop world Hive, warehousing in Hadoop. And looking over all of this, yeah, that's pretty good, but it wasn't always fast enough. And that's why we had in the Synapse world dedicated SQL pools. Look, I need to be able to get a sub-second query on my trillion rows of data, which you may or may not be able to get with Synapse. A lot of it would depend on how you would structure the data, whether you strictly followed the precepts of the Kimball format, whether you distributed your data appropriately, and how many zeros are on that check you're writing Microsoft. All those factors come into play. So you have this dedicated SQL pool that doesn't quite fit in with the rest of that world. It doesn't fit in with the data lakes, with serverless SQL pools, with Spark pools. It's just kind of on its own still. And that was a pragmatic reasoning because the serverless SQL pool wasn't fast enough for large scale operation. It was fine for small scale operation. It's very useful for that, not for large scale. Databricks has been working on this problem as well for the last several years. And I had a slide that I used in a couple of talks that pointed at here is the data lake and then getting to their notion of a lake house, where the lake house is think of it this way. In historical data warehousing, we have source systems, and we build our warehouse by transferring data into the warehouse from the source system. So we build our warehouse off of the source system. With data lakes, we have our source systems. We write those into the data lake. With modern data warehousing, we have our source systems. We write into the data lake. From the data lake, or maybe from the source system, we write into a warehouse. So this warehouse is still separate compute, oftentimes separate storage, kind of living on top of the data lake. But it is not directly from the data lake. The lake house notion is the data lake is the base. And for your warehouse, you are querying from the data lake itself. So you're not storing the data up here. This is the engine, the compute engine that accesses your data lake and collates data, aggregates data, and makes it available to end users, most likely using the SQL language because that is the language of data. So we have this notion of a lakehouse. And when Databricks pushed that idea, that was about 3 or 4 years ago that they really started pushing it heavily. It wasn't, the performance wasn't there yet. Fast forwarding a few years, the performance is getting there. And we see that with Databricks. We see that with Microsoft Fabric. Both of them are making the same bet that having your data in a data lake, you can get queries fast enough that customers are willing to accept it for their warehousing needs. And that's where we have files and tables in Microsoft Fabric, where tables are still Parquet files or their Delta format, which Parquet plus JSON. So it's still files under the covers. It's just the way that we're accessing it is a bit different, and the promises we make of this data is a bit different, that we're promising the structure will be consistent for all of the files associated with this table. And as a result, we can query it like a SQL table.
So the data lake itself is made up of like Databricks.
The data
Delta
lake, well, the data lake itself is just a giant share drive someplace. It is just a bunch of storage. And what is inside of the data lake would be files of some format. Most likely, if you have a well-designed data lake, most of your files in there are going to be in Parquet format. You may also have other stuff in there as well. You may have CSVs that are in a raw data lake because that's the way that I get them in from the client, or that's the way that we can import the data, make it available. But you may also have flat text files from elsewhere. You may have fixed length files from some system. Going back to COBOL, you may have a fixed length file that comes out of a COBOL system. You may have JSON objects, JSON arrays that are written out from handling events in Splunk or whatever. And as a result, you have all these potential different source formats. But as you go further into the data lake, everything is Zool. So everything is Parquet. And that's where we're getting at that, okay, this is the format. We don't have MDF and LDF and NDF files like we do in SQL Server. We don't have the file format structure that Oracle uses or that MySQL or Postgres use. We don't have those specialized data file forms for those relational databases. We have Parquet. That is the storage format of choice for most of this stuff. So then, on top of that, generally we're looking at a couple of languages. Obviously, I keep coming back to SQL because everybody comes back to SQL for good reason, and that good reason is Fiesel's law. By the way, if you're not familiar with Fiesel's law, that is one of the few times that I have been so arrogant as to name something after myself. And I will link the blog post because I've been getting a lot of impact out of this blog post over the past 6 years. But basically, Fiesel's law says any sufficiently advanced data retrieval process will eventually have a SQL interface. And
Well, I think that soon we'll also have Fiesel NFL TV that you're gonna.
I hope so. I would readily go for that. As long as I got all of the games. That's the important part. It's got to get all of the games. So, all right. Basically, everything's got a SQL format. Everything's got a SQL interface. But also, as sad as I am to say this, Python. Python's the primary language of all of this. And I'm choking up as a result of that. No, not a huge fan of Python. However, it is the lingua franca of data engineering at this point. So what we see is that most of the things that are working with this modern data stack or with the various tools in data engineering, most of that's Python. ELT operations, we're seeing a lot of this in Python. A lot is working with Apache Airflow. Even Azure Data Factory, there's a lot of Python under the covers. AWS Glue, it's Spark under the covers. You can do PySpark or Scala Spark. So kind of got those languages there. Databricks, PySpark, and Scala. Looking at various other tools and technologies, Chris mentions DBT, Python. I could mention other tools like DVS, Data Versioning System for data scientists, Python. You look at a lot of other common tools and processes. They tend to come back to Python as the language for data movement and data operation. Notebooks. People are so fond of notebooks. Well, that's Jupyter, which is built on their IPython notebooks. Even if you have multiple languages, under the covers, eventually you're running Python. And for the most part, even above the covers, you're still running Python. So that's where we're seeing as what I would consider a modern data stack is building on top of a data lake, pivoting toward having the data lake be the data source as opposed to an input for your ultimate data source. Using SQL and Python as the primary languages, not necessarily the only languages. Having distributed compute because you want to be able to work on a problem faster than having a single server you might be able to do. And cloud native first is probably, that's the direction that we're getting pushed, but I don't know that it's necessarily mandatory. You could do all of the same stuff on premises, but Microsoft's going to push you toward Fabric. Databricks is going to push you toward their unified analytics platform. Kafka is going to push you toward, or Confluent is going to push you toward their cloud platform. When it comes to Hadoop, there is really not much in the way of on-premises Hadoop anymore. Cloudera, to the extent that they're still relevant, which not really, but they're cloud only. I don't think they even have an on-premises distribution ever since Cloudera and Hortonworks combined. And that was, 6 years ago or so? So, yeah, it had to be at least 5 years ago. Might have been 6. And they don't have an on-prem version anymore. So, yes, I think that a lot of companies are pushing toward, hey, if you want to be modern, use our cloud service. The cynical part of me says that a lot of this is also licensing related, that it's a lot easier to sell cloud licenses and to keep people paying more than to have something on premises. But you can build, you can have modern data stack at home. So like the meme, but mom, I want modern data stack. Honey, we have modern data stack at home. Modern data stack at home. Share drive with a bunch of Excel files.
Yeah, that's funny.
I think that Snowflake's appeal to many is the cloud native aspect, though I think license is factor. Snowflake's appeal is mostly we'll do the tuning for you. So you just put your data in and we'll make it fast without having to think about it. And then you get the bill and you realize that maybe I should have thought about it. And by the way, Enhanced QC says, I failed an interview recently answering the question of modern architecture. Architecture in scare quotes because, well, it is kind of scary. The company's architect was a VMware guru. I explained that modern architecture refers to further and further abstraction away from the OS. Lambda architectures, or Lambda either in terms of architecture or in terms of function apps, Docker, containers, etc. Yeah, I think when it comes to modern, if we're thinking systems architecture, yes, it is further and further abstraction away. It's containerization, software as a service, function as a service, whether that's cloud-based or not. But thinking in terms of I am not running on bare metal, I want to be able to define what the base should look like for my system and making it so that it can run on somebody else's machine, just like it does in my dev environment. I think that those are absolutely big parts of modern architecture. Now, maybe this person has some other definition of what modern architecture looks like, but virtualization is still incredibly common. It is such a core part of systems today that the exception, I think, is bare metal. The norm is VMs because VMs are so much easier to administrate, and you can also partition out hardware more finely. And then containerization is just an enhancement in that concept of, well, instead of having all of this RAM and CPU dedicated to a virtual machine, I could have 20 containers running in this, and I can use orchestration using Kubernetes or Docker Swarm or whatever to orchestrate my systems. You seem confused, Mike.
Sorry, I was just checking a job.
Oh, yeah, that
6-hour query in process.
That can be confusing for sure. So
I'll tune it eventually.
So as far as it goes, yeah, I suppose I'm sure that person had something else in mind for what modern means. But yeah, you ask me modern, that's what I look at. The norm being virtualization either through virtual machines, which is not that modern. We're talking, 15 years ago that virtualization really became normal. Containerization, I don't say go containerize things just because it's new, but it's very powerful. It's a powerful technique in the right circumstances. And that I think is what I would think of. And if we're talking application architectures or let's say data architectures, Lambda and Kappa are the two more recent architecture styles. Lambda being sort of an accident of this is what works given the systems that were in place in 2015. But yeah, now, because we are near the top of the hour, Mighty 7 Under has a question. What is the best way to monitor or tools or resources for monitoring SQL databases in Azure? I can second Anders. SentryOne is a good good solution. I guess some of it's going to depend on how much you're willing to pay and how conversant you are with SQL Server and its capabilities. If you're pretty familiar with extended events, you can write a lot of extended events and perform alerting based on what you're pulling out of the system metrics. If you're not that conversant, you're not interested in working with a bunch of XML, SentryOne, yes, definitely a good product there. if you're talking Azure SQL database versus Azure SQL Managed Instance or virtual machines running in Azure, then there are some capabilities that are in the Azure portal where you can get information into log analytics and write them into a log analytics workspace. So there are some things that are automatically tracked and monitored when you enable that capability. I think that costs extra, but I don't remember. If you're talking a virtual machine that's running in Azure, then Sentry One or writing extended events. Extended events would be the key area to look. There's also, are you looking at what's going on my system right now? Well, in that case, who is active? And who is active has been around for a very long time because it is a very good product. This is a simple stored procedure that you can run that tells you what's going on in my system right now. Adam Mechanic wrote it 15 plus years ago, and it's still actively maintained. But yeah, that'll tell you, hey, who's running queries? What are those queries? It's a very extensible solution for getting quick information that you can run through Management Studio or Azure Data Studio. There are plenty of other.
My DBA.
Say again?
I just sent it to my DBAs because we don't have it.
Yeah, it's a stored procedure, easy to install, and I love the thing. But if you're looking at more of a holistic solution of tracking things over time and giving you some solution insights, then Sentry One is going to be, I think, the tool of choice. Azure Database, I did implement a bit, but I was writing writing a whole lot. Yeah. If it's writing that much data, that's a little excessive. And there are ways to cut back on how much it's writing. You can poll less frequently. You can track fewer events. You can sample data using extended events. Because once you get past a few gigs of data, let's say 1 or 2 gigabytes per day, my question is, are you able to make good use of the information that you're pulling in? Because otherwise, there's not much point in tracking that monitoring data if you're not going to be able to make good use of it. So, all right, we successfully got through the hour without even me going to my threat of what I would talk about if we couldn't. So, thanks everyone for tuning in. Remember, next episode of Shop Talk 2 weeks from today. Our SQL Server, the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group, our next meeting will be the second Tuesday. That'll be Advanced DBA. Third Tuesday will be main meeting. Fourth Tuesday will be Business Intelligence and Data Science. We'll have those up in the next few days. And that's all at meetup.com/trypass. And until we see each other in a future episode of Shop Talk or wherever, everyone, take care.